Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate Day 539, September 4th, 2018. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully you guys all had a really good Labor Day weekend and got a little time off, and you got a little relaxation in, had some grill outs, and did your thing, man. Hopefully you're all doing good. Okay, so not a lot of news yesterday, obviously, or even the day before, because Labor Day weekend you don't have a lot going on. So I want to take this opportunity and kind of this little slow period here to just focus on the next 60-90 days and what we think that we can expect to see. And some things that are going to be very critical to the next 60-90 days. Of course, the most important thing being the midterm elections and winning them, holding the House. That is critical. But before we get to that, I do want to touch on one thing that did break last night. And a lot of you people are familiar with this guy, Rex. I don't follow him necessarily, but I do whenever he comes out with something fairly bombshell. It gets spread around, and I'll pick up on it. So we've heard from Rex before, but he did a series of tweets where he laid out this something he stumbled onto, which is that going through the FISA court is not the only way to get a FISA warrant. And he reveals the fact that the Attorney General can bypass the FISA court if it is an emergency. Essentially, the wording is obviously very legal, but essentially what it means is that there's some emergency situation, then the Attorney General can get a FISA warrant and bypass the FISA court. And of course, because there was no hearings, no questions answered, and all they did was just brief the application, if they even did that, this is what got him onto that trail. So the question we're asking is, did Loretta Lynch push through the FISA warrants on Carter Page? Of course, we know there were no hearings. The AG can order surveillance without FISA court approval. It is 50 U.S. Code 1805. 50 U.S. Code 1805, if you want to look it up and read it. One more time, that's 50 U.S. Code 1805. It basically says that excuse me, that notwithstanding any other provision of this subchapter, the Attorney General may authorize the emergency employment of electronic surveillance if the AG determines that an emergency situation exists, or that the AG needs a factual basis, or I should say, and the AG would need a factual basis within 7 days of the emergency decree. So what would have been the emergency decree? Well, as Rex points out, we know that on October the 6th is when they began making the move to get the Carter Page application, and the actual warrant was granted on October 21st. But what happened the day after they began putting together the application on October 6th of 2016? Well, the very next day, October 7th, is when Obama came out and formally accused Russia of meddling in the election. So the question is, did Obama and Get Back Loretta Lynch, along with Sally Yates and Comey and the whole gang, sit around and think how they could get around the FISA court? Because they knew that if they went to the FISA court would look at the FISA application, maybe ask some questions and possibly turn it down. We know that in the footnote, they made a footnote on that first application stating that there may be some political interest involved here. That certainly would have evoked questions or some kind of response from the FISA court. The fact that the FISA court has not weighed in at all and no one has said anything, including Judge Collier, it's one thing to say that the FISA court signed off on all this stuff, but what if we find out that the FISA court was never even involved in being given an opportunity to sign off on anything because they were overridden by the Attorney General using this emergency power that she has, or the Attorney General that they have, I should say, to launch a surveillance operation without going through the FISA process? Did they sit around and say, man, this is never going to make it through the FISA court. We can't go that route, but we got to get the FISA warrant. What are we going to do? And maybe Attorney General Lynch said, hey, I can do it through an emergency, but I need some I need you, President Obama, to go out there and say something that would trigger an emergency, such as the Russians are meddling in the 2016 election. Based on that, I could push through an emergency surveillance warrant on Carter Page. Okay, let's just assume that that's what happened, and I don't know that that's what happened, but there's more speculation that that's maybe what happened. It's certainly an explanation. It's a hell of a lot better than the FISA court not bothering to ask a single question or holding a single hearing. It would at least give them cover. But how do we explain the 3 remaining renewals? And does this emergency situation also bypass the Woods requirement that you go through the Woods process and have these other individuals look at it and verify it as well? Does it mean that you don't have to do that? Because if that's what this means, and we see the way that it was used, then why have the damn FISA court at all? I mean, after all it is a rubber stamp anyway. It's just there to look good. I mean, if the president and people in counterintelligence and the FBI director can just write national security letters and bypass the process, if the attorney general can just declare that there's an emergency and bypass the process, what is the process? It's cover. Just something that the government created to make us all feel good, to make us all think, yeah, well, you know, yeah, they can get these FISA warrants, but there's a real strict process they got to go through. It's hard to do. All smoke and mirrors. They want to launch a massive surveillance operation on anyone for any reason or no reason at all. They just do it. All these things are just cover. It's wrapping paper. That's all it is. Birdcage liners. That's what this is looking like. There's a lot of problems with the whole FISA court process. The whole damn thing needs to be completely terminated. And this idea that an attorney general or a president, national security letters, all these things that bypass the constitutional protections that we have with the Fourth Amendment need to be completely repealed or undone. We have a Fourth Amendment for a reason. The FISA court, the national security letters, this emergency procedure that an AG can go through, these things just completely destroy the Fourth Amendment. Why have it? If we find out that this is what was done, there's going to be hell to pay. There better be hell to pay. Because this was not an emergency situation. Carter Page was being framed. He was being set up as part of a political operation being run by the Obama administration, which would include Loretta Lynch. This was a political operation. Has Carter Page been arrested? Of course he hasn't. Was there any real evidence that he was involved in some sort of Trump-Russia collusion? That he was involved in fixing the elections with the Russians? Or that he was a foreign or an agent of a foreign government? Come on now. No one would believe that. It won't stand up to scrutiny. And it needs to be scrutinized. And I'm not waiting on Sessions or Huber. This stuff needs to be completely aired out, man. It really does. The corruption is just absolutely mind-boggling. I don't know how Carter Page hasn't already filed a lawsuit. Well, I know he's filed various lawsuits and various things, but I don't think he's filed one on this particular issue, specifically that his constitutional rights were violated, his civil rights were violated, trampled on, big time. He would win this case slam dunk. There's a lot more to learn about this whole FISA court process and what was done and whether or not there really was some sort of an emergency measure taken by Loretta Lynch and whether they skirted around the FISA court, and that explains why there were no hearings and no questions and all these things. This needs to be dug into and really understood, and I expect that over the next couple days we are going to hear more about this, certainly, because this is kind of bombshell information, and it's not coming out of the mainstream reporters. So now, as I said at the beginning of the video, I just want to focus on the next 60, 90 days for the things that we should be looking at. Obviously, the midterm election is the major thing, and there's something extraordinary going on in this midterm. It is extraordinary in modern political times, because what normally happens is the party whose president is in power loses seats in the midterm. This is typically blamed on the fact that they'll say, well, the voters of the party that won the White House now feel good because they won, so they're less motivated to go out and vote because their guy's in there, and so that will depress or keep as many people coming out to vote. And therefore, you have the other party who lost, and their guy is not in the White House, and they're very upset because they lost, and they kind of feel the fire under their ass, and so they want to go out, and they want to go out in larger numbers and vote in larger numbers. This is what they equate to being the turnout situation. It usually results in a president's party losing seats in the midterm. It comes down to turnout, and based on the previous explanation is how they justify the fact that the president, the party who's got the president in the White House, will have lower turnout. Now, I think there's something else to this too, and then I think it has also to do with the fact that a lot of times the president goes out along with his party and campaigns on a lot of things they say they're going to do. And then he gets elected and he doesn't do any of it or little of it. And therefore, the voters think, oh man, we thought we were getting a good guy this time. He was actually going to do what he said. Nah, it doesn't look like it. Screw it. I'm staying home. So I think there's a lot of that goes on as well. But we have an extraordinary situation with Donald Trump. Because if you look at, first of all, you look at Donald Trump, President Trump, has endorsed 31, or there's been 31 candidates that have campaigned on Trump's agenda. 31 Republicans in the Congress who've campaigned on the Trump agenda. They all won their races. 31 for 31 for Republicans who campaigned to continue the policies of President Trump. That's extraordinary. That's extraordinary. Another thing that you see is they're begging him to come in and campaign for him. This is extraordinary. Normally, the president in his first midterm, the people in his party running for Congress tell him to stay away because his popularity has dropped because he made all those promises and didn't keep any of them. So he's not very popular. He's taken hits, he's made mistakes, he's done various things. And so generally in the midterm, a lot of times members of his party running for Congress will say, you better stay out of my district. Folks are not real happy with you. I could probably do better on my own. But that's not what you see here with President Trump. This is, again, historic. You've got members of Congress all across the country begging the president to come and campaign because his approval ratings with the party I've seen two polls recently, one at 88% and one at 90%. When you are at 88 and 90% in your first midterm as the president, this is historic. Absolutely historic. And this is why, one of the many reasons why, I believe that the Republicans will hold the House. But they have to go out and campaign on his agenda, and he probably has to go help push some of them across the finish line. So this is extraordinary what we're looking at here coming up in the midterms. Now we can also expect, in fact we know, something else is going to happen 2 weeks before Election Day for the fall midterms. That's going to be the third quarter GDP report. The most recent GDP report was 4.6%, had to be adjusted upward. Now we're hearing talk that in the third quarter, there's people actually talking about the fact that we may hit 5% GDP growth. If the third quarter GDP numbers come out and we are anywhere between 4.4, 4.5%, and especially anywhere near 5% GDP growth, that's it. I mean, that's ball game over. It will be nearly impossible to defeat the Republicans if the third quarter, just a little less than 2 weeks before the vote, if we see numbers showing 4.5 to 5% GDP growth. That will be the icing on the cake. Very, very difficult to be successful against your opponent when your opponent is pushing 4.5 to 5% GDP growth. That's the number one issue people vote on, is the economy, the growing economy. And that report's going to be coming out just before the vote. and that could be a major factor. We know it's going to be at least 4%. I mean, even if it came out and it was 4%, a flat 4%, that is still very good. But if it comes out 4.5% to 5%, ball game. Not only will we hold the House, we may pick up seats, which would be, again, historic. Of course, we know we have Uncle Bob the Executioner. We don't know what plan he's going to lay out, but we do know that his mission at this point, he couldn't take down Trump with what he had, so his next option will be to produce a report that suggests the road to impeachment for something other than what was the initial investigation was about, which was Trump-Russia collusion. So he'll move on to something like obstruction. So we can expect that one of two things is going to happen. Either Uncle Bob in the next couple weeks, next 2-3 weeks, is going to drop a report laying out a pathway for impeachment because of what he believes is obstruction of justice. Not sure what he would have been obstructing. There was never any crime to be obstructing. But that's okay. It doesn't matter. It's all propaganda. It's all for the purpose of propaganda, to give the Democrats something to crow about for the midterm elections, hoping that it's enough to get them to take back the House. So we can expect that Uncle Bob's going to drop some sort of a report that's about a 75% likelihood that that's going to happen. And the report's likely going to lay out a path towards impeachment based on obstruction. This is what I believe Uncle Bob is going to do. But there's also, I would say, about a 25% chance that he will simply lay low over the next 6 to 8 weeks, because that's what you're supposed to do as a special counsel. You're not supposed to impact an election. So his other option would be to lay low and then wait till after the election and then get back to work on continuing to do what he's been doing, which would mean to dog Trump well into 2020. The problem is, if Trump and the Republicans are successful in the midterms, it's very likely that we're going to see a lot of changes. And one of them may be Attorney General Sessions, as well as Deputy Attorney General Rodenstein. They may be gone, and Trump might put in someone there who forces Uncle Bob to either put up or shut up, and to wrap it up, to finish it up. Show us what you got. It's been 2 years. If you got something, show it. Otherwise, I'm shutting it down. That's what a new AG could do. So Uncle Bob is obviously having to figure that out with his friends. They're going to have to speculate on how they think this would work out. That's really the two options he's got: to produce the report that lays out the path to impeachment, or shut his mouth for the next 6 to 8 weeks and then hope that the Democrats win the House after the midterms and he can continue his witch hunt there, continue looking for anything he can to dog Trump into 2020. That's really the two options he has, but there are perilous risk with both. Of course, we know that Greg Jarrett was signaling this week that he believes Trump may declassify the Russia investigation, which of course would be the Mueller investigation, is what we're talking about. Now, there's a lot that would be learned, because there's a lot of people Mueller would have interviewed. And it's not so much the questions that Mueller asked, it will be the questions Mueller did not ask. It will not so much be the people that he did interview as much as it will be the people he did not interview. Will tell us a lot about how he went about his investigation. We will get to see the blueprint for the Mueller investigation, which will lay out clearly that it was never about finding Trump-Russia or any of the crimes or any of the things that happened during the 2016 election. It will clearly show that it was a witch hunt to take down the president. That's what it will likely show. But Trump should declassify it all, as well as everything else having to do with anything having to do with the 2016 election, Trump-Russia. At which point, Sessions could unrecuse himself, which he's not going to do. So that's something that we have to watch as well. Now we know that Giuliani is working on, and probably already has completed or is close to completion, his own report. And that report is going to be calling in to question the investigation of Uncle Bob the Executioner, and probably focusing a lot on his conflicts of interest, of which there are many. Conflicts of interest of those who he relied on for information, including Mr. Weissman, being briefed on the dossier by Mr. Orr. There's a lot of problems, and I expect Rudy Giuliani is going to point out a lot of them. So a counter report to the Mueller report is something to watch for. You know it's coming. If the Mueller report comes, the counter report is coming right behind it. Another thing that we have to be focusing on, obviously winning the midterms is paramount. It's the most important thing coming in the near future. But as soon as the midterms are over, or just maybe within a couple days beforehand, it will be time for a lot of us to put our activist hats on and start calling our member of Congress to tell him that we want Jim Jordan as the speaker, because they'll have that vote pretty quickly. As soon as the election is over, they'll move very, very quickly, because they don't want to see a public grassroots campaign for Jordan pop up. That's not what they want to see. So what they'll likely do is, if the Republicans hold the House, and I expect they will, then what they will do is very quickly, maybe within the same day or within 24 hours, they will have their little closed-door voting session to vote for the next speaker. And Jim Jordan will get railroaded. So what we're going to need to do about 2 or 3 days before the election is that we'll need to contact our member of Congress and let them know that if we win the House, that we want them to vote for Jim Jordan as the speaker. I will be reminding you, believe me. I'll probably call live on video. I will call my congressman right here on a video, so you can all see exactly what I'm talking about, to let them know, in no uncertain terms, that I will expect my member of Congress to support Jim Jordan to be the speaker when we win back the House. So these are the things that we have coming up. And then, of course, we know probably something I talked about a few weeks ago, 2 weeks also after the November elections, the Gubarev versus BuzzFeed case, civil case, resumes. And remember what we talked about there. The judge has ruled that the DNC, which would be the Right Reverend, Wasserman Schultz, Perez, Brazil, the whole group of them, have to testify and be deposed by Gubarev's lawyers and probably by BuzzFeed's lawyers. They also have to produce a lot of documentation. Also, there'll be people from the DOJ and the FBI who are also going to be forced by the judge in that case to give depositions. Because ultimately the judge in the BuzzFeed case, it's all come down to, was the dossier, is it true? Is there any evidence that it was true? Did the Justice Department FBI act on it because it was valid information and therefore gave BuzzFeed the right to publish the story? This is what the judge has to determine, is the validity of the dossier. And, of course, everyone is going to have to comment, as well as what went on with the alleged Russian hacking of the DNC. The DNC is going to have to prove that. The judge is not taking CrowdStrike's word for it necessarily. Or if the judge is going to allow the CrowdStrike report, the judge wants the details and the forensics and the evidence. For the judge to decide this case in the Gubarev situation versus BuzzFeed, all these people are going to be called in, and we learned this about a month ago. That's what the judge's ruling was. The DNC, as well as members of the DOJ and FBI, have to come in and be deposed by the attorneys for both Mr. Gubarev and the attorneys for BuzzFeed. And we also learned that Mr. Gubarev's attorney said that he is going to share all the information he has from the civil lawsuit with any congressional committee that requests from him any of those documents or information. So right after the midterms, the civil case in the BuzzFeed versus Gubarev is going to be producing a lot more information. And these depositions are, of course, critical. Because even though we don't have a special counsel by the Congress or by the Attorney General or anything like that, the depositions in the civil suit whatever they say in that civil suit in the depositions, they're going to have to say to a special counsel, or they're going to have to say to a grand jury. They can't say something different, and all that information will be public record. Mr. Goodbrev's attorneys have said they will share it with any members of Congress or congressional committees that are requesting it. So we are going to get depositions from all these people. Lynch, Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Page, the whole crew, along with those folks at the DNC, all going to be deposed. So it's going to be a real circus. And as we know, the silly season officially starts today. So for the next 7 weeks or so, we're all going to be bombarded day after day after day with campaign commercials. And it's going to be very, very ugly. Very, very ugly, of course. Maybe as ugly as we've ever seen. The Democrats will be attacking Trump. And it's the only strategy they really have. They really have not, in the past 2 years, since the 2016 election and the meltdown, they've never come to grips with it, never rebounded from it, and said, hey, we better put together a positive agenda that we can go out and sell in the midterms or in 2020. They've never done that. They have only focused on trying to derail Trump or attack Trump. But the problem is, all the things that they're saying about him are falling on deaf ears. That's why you have the walk-away movement. That's why the double of number of blacks who voted for Trump in 2016 are expected to vote for him in 2018 in the midterms. Is because all the things that they're saying simply are not panning out. The numbers in the economy, and we're not in any new wars. He's done a good job on foreign policy. He's done a great job on renegotiating these trade deals for the benefit of the middle class, the blue-collar workers. So Trump's agenda in the past 2 years has been very successful. And so all the negative attacks on him are falling on deaf ears. And the Democrats really didn't come up with a competing agenda. All they have is a bunch of negative attacks. And that's simply not going to carry the day in the midterms. But you can expect that they'll continue. There'll be dirty tricks. There'll be lies. There'll be all sorts of nasty things over the next 7 weeks. We're going to be inundated with this type of stuff. I expect that the Republicans are going to try to run a positive campaign and nationalize it. And they're going to try to nationalize Trump's agenda. They're going to say, hey, vote for us so we can continue Trump's agenda. This is going to be a nationalized campaign for the Republicans. The Democrats as well. But their nationalized agenda is going to be stop Trump because he's creating too many jobs. He's fixing the trade deals. He's kept us at peace. He's in the process of possibly denuclearizing North Korea. He's tightened the screws on Iran. He's doing all these things. So ultimately, the next 7 weeks are going to be very topsy-turvy. There'll be a lot more stuff coming out about the Spygate scandal. And of course, we'll also have to look right after the midterm elections whether or not Trump decides to fire Sessions and probably Rodenstein along with him. Now, I know a lot of you follow Q and trust the plan and things like that. That's great. I really hope that's true. But if Sessions and Huber have got something going, they've got about 7 weeks to lower the boom, drop the hammer, because I'm pretty sure that Trump will waste very little time after the midterm, probably within hours of the midterm. He will fire Sessions and Rodenstein, maybe Wray as well. So very, very tricky 7 weeks coming up. It's going to be pretty topsy-turvy, pretty crazy. But I'll be here every day to report to you what's going on. Be looking forward to the comment sections for all of you. Of course, to keep me on my toes and get to things that I can't get to. But we'll all be here together. We're all going to go through this together. And hopefully at the end of the day, when we arrive on the day after the midterm elections, it's a huge victory for Republicans holding the House, gaining seats in the Senate. We get Jim Jordan as Speaker. And we begin the process of exposing the deep state coup, and we hold the perps accountable. There we go. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. You guys have a good night. Goodbye.